You're listening to the Diginauts on the Good Talk Podcast Network.
Hey, it's the Diginauts. On this week's episode,
Elon Musk starts yet another company connecting technology to your brain.
And speaking of which, scientists have developed an artificial synapse. Is this the first step in building a computerized brain?
Do you really own the products you purchase? A Lexmark patent trial may change that.
Hear all about it right after this. On the Diginauts. Society,
The future,
morality,
disruption,
policy,
humanity,
innovation,
technology,
morality, the future, law, humanity, society. Ooh, robot army, huh? Yeah, that sounds good.
Diginauts.
Greetings, mortals. My name is Deron,
and I'm Eric.
and we are the Diginauts. We've been away for a while, but we're back. Thanks for Thanks for your patience, Eric, as I moved to a new location and all of my life was in boxes. I literally, we're recording this today. I have the soundboard sitting on two plastic organizers, and my microphone is on a TV tray with a sound baffle constructed from a moving box and a mover blanket.
Did you say minion?
A moving box, a minion box. It's one of the Steve Carell movie where they. Anyway, so we have a new show for you today. This is episode 18. We are going to be discussing artificial intelligence quite a bit today, and automation, and how none of us is ever going to have a job in the future. We've hit on it quite a bit before because it's just really kind of what's happening in our world today. But it's coming, right? There are story after story. You have our top of mind story today. What do you got for us?
I do. As if Elon Musk didn't have enough to do, he's starting another company. This one he's calling Neuralink, and it's ultimately to merge the brain with artificial intelligence. Now, unbeknownst to someone who owned the trademark, and I believe also the domain to Neuralink, Elon purchased it from that person not too long ago. So probably in retrospect, he'll probably be wishing he may have charged a little more for it.
Like if you're the person who squatted on apple.com somewhere in the 90s and now you're like, oh, geez. Although I got to say, right, like if you get a phone call and it's like, hi, this is Elon Musk. I want to buy something from you. I feel like you're gonna crank that number up as high as your imagination can go.
I would ask for Tesla stock.
Fair enough. Okay, so what's the point of this company? I mean, obviously, I read the headline and I was like, no, I don't want to be a cyborg. But we've talked about his definition of, he kind of says, well, look, we're all cyborgs now, and he essentially means by that computer assisted, right? So he considered the fact that we all carry smartphones around as kind of a step in that direction.
Exactly.
How's he looking to push it?
So instead of, in the palm of your hand, imagine electrodes implanted in the brain.
Nope. And we're done. But I interrupted.
Huh?
I said I apologize for interrupting. But that, see, I saw the headline and my first reaction was like, he wants to merge human brains with technology, and I'm like, no. Like, I want them to find. I want a hat that I can wear, right? That like, that's what makes the technology go. Not this. Did you read about the like Swedish company that's implanting chips in the fingers of all of their employees? Basically, so you don't have to wear a badge. You can just wave your finger.
I could do without that.
Right? Well, it has other benefits, I guess, but like, yeah, no. There's no company that I love working for enough that I need to have their hardware in me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, what happens if you leave, or can they not leave?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you de-implant it, right? And then there's all the nefarious, like, does that mean that they can tell where you are at the company all the time? Are they like, able to double check your timesheets? Like, no, you took a 14-minute bathroom break today. You owe back in, right? Like, no, I'm not interested in any of that. I mean, I would so quickly leave that company.
If you can.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Once the chip's in you,
Turns into a magnet.
You lose the will to leave the company. Anyway, so Elon Musk, he of 19 companies, is he going to be the CEO of this one again too, or is he just kind of starting a new one?
Great question. I think he would likely be the CEO. I mean, he is, I think, of all of his other ventures thus far.
Busy man.
You know what? You know how we talked about the nefarious reasons or uses of this?
Okay.
Well, lo and behold, they're supposedly seeking investment from Founders Fund, who happens to be the firm founded by Peter Thiel.
Hey. There's a guy you trust. So wait, but I don't have any dirt on Elon Musk in terms of, like, he hasn't said anything that's creeped me out in terms of personal space and whatnot. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think he also started an organization whose goal is to ensure that, like, AI doesn't go awry and, is used for bad purposes. But
well, that is for the best. Here's hoping. So do we have any information on like what the technology is behind this company, or is this just kind of another big picture idea where he's the visionary and he tosses, his sort of fortune at it and says, "All right, smart people, go make me a thing." That's how I imagine his life. I imagine he gets up, has a glass of orange juice, eats a piece of bacon, has a revolutionary idea on how humanity and society can forever function, and then, makes millions happen.
Sips his, I forgot, whatever juice.
Oh, does he have a special regimen?
Oh, I don't know. I was trying to think of that one kids drink, just as a joke.
Oh, Tang?
What?
Tang?
No,
that's astronaut juice.
Although that would be a good one. a nice retro flavor. I honestly can't
Sunny
think
D?
of it. Now, getting closer.
The purple stuff?
They're in silver pouches.
Oh, Capri Sun.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but I'm really glad that we took a minute of our listeners' lives to hone
this
in
episode
on exactly.
Sponsored by Tang.
Wouldn't that be amazing if we actually had that sponsorship lined up and that was the whole reason we did that? That would be slick. We don't. Diginauts is not affiliated in any way with Capri Sun or its parent companies. All right. Anyway. So that's about all we know about Neuralink at this point. We will certainly be monitoring it and Elon Musk's next brain fire. For now, all we know is that we're one step closer to brains and computers being the same thing. I, for one, continue to use the skin as my definition of where the barrier should be. But like so many advancements, I'm sure I will lose out. But that's it for segment 1 this week.
Hey, how are you liking the podcast so far? Don't tell me. Take some time, go to iTunes, find our podcast, give us a nice 5-star rating, be honest, give us constructive feedback in the comments. This will help us not only make more episodes, more intriguing content, but also help more people discover us. Thanks a lot.
Time for segment 2. We're going to bring you a new installment of the Future File, and here's definitely some stuff from the future. The story is that a team of researchers has put together an artificial synapse. And what's cool about that is that it can learn autonomously. Yeah. Now,
Learn what?
well, so if you think about AI leading up till now, it's essentially algorithms, right? Like it's we have put together the computer technology that we have now, and we've trained it to behave in approximations of human thinking and human brains, right? So, if we look at any attempt to be creative on the part of an AI, the first thing they have to do is absorb a tremendous amount of data. We've talked about like the computers writing songs. We're actually going to talk about computers and creativity again later in the show today. They have to take huge amounts of examples in order to be able to kind of analyze them and put it together, which in fairness, so do human children as they learned about the world. Yep. And this is essentially them saying like, yeah, that's cool and all. We're going to do that instead of in software. We're going to do that in hardware. So they've developed a super tiny, like super thin plate that can either, have a charge or not. So in some ways, it's not that different than a diode, but it's on a much more nano scale. So it's happening kind of like human nerves, where you are sending, like in humans, we have the kind of our nervous system works, if I can try to reach back to, high school biology, by switching, I think it's potassium and sodium ions switch back and forth, and that kind of represents the electrical charge moving along. And they're essentially doing that with electrons.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not a huge like, oh, and now we know everything, right? But it's like they see this as a step towards better AI. It seems kind of counterintuitive to me, right? Because almost every technological advancement we've had recently has been about like, well, we don't do it in hardware anymore. Now we have software that does all that. And this is kind of the opposite direction for AI. It's like, well, we're going to move it to hardware, and that's going to make it all better. But it's essentially a step towards a complete artificial brain. So when they say it can learn autonomously, they think that if they put that kind of, I think it's theoretical. And I'll say, I definitely don't understand this technology. But what we're really talking about here is essentially building a brain, where they're using a ton of these little artificial synapses, memristors they're calling them, and kind of putting them into the chips instead of software. So you kind of have the fundamentals of what science fiction has been doing for androids for a while.
So I guess like they're in the testing stage. Like, how close to reality is this?
Well, it's reality already in the fact that they have created the artificial synapses in the lab, that they have gotten some, autonomous learning. It's not clear to me kind of what the measure of that is. And then that in turn creates the possibility of neural networks built out of these. So I think that's kind of where we're at, where the little bits have been made. They haven't been put into a full computer brain, but that's next. So that's where we're headed. I don't know. I mean, what's your take on artificial brains? Does it scare you to think of, and maybe this is just my egocentric, nature, right? We seem to be on the path of building creatures to surpass us, right? I mean, there isn't a kind of, robot that works in science the way science fiction does, where it's, both faster and smarter and stronger than us all at the same time, right? Right now we have robots that can lift a lot more, and also robots over here that can go faster, and also robots that are smarter, but not all in the same robot yet. But if you scoot forward a little while, you are talking about creating an entity that's got to be in every way superior, right? I mean, Eric, does that freak you out? Or is that just like, hooray, now we all have automated people to do all the work for us. Here we've been using our hands like suckers up until now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can lead to a lot of progress. I think the key is how it's used, right? Like, you can always think about the good and the bad sides,
Yeah.
right?
Like so many things, it's going to have good, it's going to have bad. And the question is, how do we keep some people from doing the bad, right? Because if you can manage to build a robot army, you can take over the world. You just have to build it faster than anybody else builds it. Maybe this is a fault in my character that's where my brain goes, is like, ooh, robot army, huh? Yeah, that sounds good. They can all learn stuff. I can teach them all sorts of things.
Right.
I don't know what I would actually use a robot army for, but that's immediately what, when I hear about artificial brains, I'm like, oh, cool, army. There's an insight into my character. As we like to say, this is another story that we'll be paying attention to. We'll see, kind of where the future. I feel like there's a lot of different emerging technologies that are set to push us past the microchip. And I think, whether it's quantum computing, whether it's, laser computing, where the zeros and ones are being transmitted literally at the speed of light, whether it's something like this, where we're actually doing a biomimetic brain, something's gonna, if I'm Intel, I'm thinking I better be the one that comes up with this, because otherwise I'm going to be put out of business. We shall see. If you are looking for brand identity on the cheap, and I do mean cheap, Logo Nerds is the place to go. Do you need a header design for your blog, your website, maybe a personal avatar to use on your Twitter page? Maybe you just did a CD and you want to put a logo on it. Well, you can get a bunch of designs, super cheap, $27 for 3 different designs and then revisions. How are you going to beat that? You're not. So go to goodtalknetwork.com, click on ads, click on Logo Nerds, and help support this podcast.
In Juris Prudent, we'll talk about how potentially precedent-setting court case really changes or could change the definition of ownership of the products that you buy.
This is good stuff. What do you got for us?
Well, so it all started with a case where Impression Products versus Lexmark. And for those that don't know those companies, Impression basically makes, I believe, and/or refills printer ink cartridges, and Lexmark is not only a manufacturer of printers but also ink and ink itself. Now, it's currently on appeal in the federal circuit, and last year they affirmed that its own precedent allowing the patent holders to restrict consumers and how they can use the products that they buy. So Lexmark is trying to leverage and win this case to ultimately prevent people purchasing ink cartridges that have been refilled and reused and whatnot with cheaper ink, right? Like, ink is more expensive than like oil and gasoline if you did like the gallon to gallon equivalent.
By quite a bit, right?
So exactly. Like, I don't know the exact amount. It's some absurd price if you were to gross it up.
And this is why, I mean,
gasoline gallon.
Because I've seen some things on the business models of printer manufacturers, and essentially the printer itself is a loss lead.
Yep.
At least for a lot of printer companies, that the real
Without
money is in selling you ink cartridges and toner cartridges.
Exactly.
Where the black water costs, and I'm kidding, right? Because there's science going on there behind like a toner, in a laser printer. But some of it is ink, right? And that's why these other companies have come along and said, yeah, we have ink here. Fill your container with this and stick it back in, rather than what they're telling you to do, that you have to, you must send it back and it will only work if you use one of our own. Now, we should say that we haven't done the sort of consumer research to look into the effectiveness of replacements of the different, if we take a Lexmark or any other printer company's cartridge and we put in proper ink and we just kind of run with it, does it work the same? Is there any quality loss? Are you going to run a higher risk of leaking? All those things, right? So we don't know what the claims of the companies are even. That said, there's sort of a conventional wisdom to the idea that it's a plastic box with ink in it. So
yeah, I mean, people have been doing, they use syringes to put in, the cheaper ink and essentially reuse the cartridges that have like the, electric connectors that will work appropriately.
Because there is some electronics there that actually handles, how the ink comes out of the cartridge.
Right. Now, what's meaningful about this case is that if Lexmark wins and ultimately prevents people from reusing and refilling the Lexmark ink cartridges with the cheaper ink, this has broader impact on anything and everything that you physically buy.
Right. And I'm going to have to root against Lexmark. I've in disclosure, I've done some work for Lexmark in the past as a consultant. The folks I worked with were nice people. So, I say this with nothing against any individual who works there or the company themselves. But in terms of the precedent it sets, yuck, right? Like, I don't want to get into a world where I buy something and then I can or can't do, like, we're already well past what I'm comfortable with, especially in basically the computer world or the phone world, right? Where Amazon wants to sell you its thing, and then it wants its thing to continue to sell you more things from Amazon, for example, right? And if I want to take that Amazon thing and replace the software, that's a violation of my terms of use or whatever. No, I bought it. Right? Like, I get to, if I want to turn it into a hockey puck, or if I want to use it as the base of a new robot, or if I want to install Mac OS on it, and, and I paid for Mac OS, let's say, then I should be able to do that.
Right. And you make a great point, right? Like, it touches upon many things. And to expand upon that further, there's another case that I think is still in progress where John Deere tractors come with proprietary software that can be expensive to maintain and upgrade.
I had no idea that there was tractor software.
What?
I had no idea that there was tractor software.
Yes. So what's happening is these farmers are basically purchasing a hack or crack to modify the software in these tractors. And John Deere is like, wait a minute. Like, in a similar way that Lexmark is saying, hey, you can't reuse and refill my cartridges, they're basically saying, hey, you cannot alter your tractor code.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to play devil's advocate, you can see, and especially when it becomes a tractor, right, there's a degree to which it's like, well, here's an automated machine that's attached to a thresher or a plow or, a grinder or whatever the case may be, a giant piece of machinery that is meant to destroy or, it's dangerous. And so there's a degree to which they have a safety responsibility to their customers, and they, on some level, have a right to say, well, you can only use it a certain way. I think that argument doesn't hold in the case of a printer. But you could see where a tractor company might make the argument that they can only be held liable if they are responsible. Although I would think that it's easy enough to say, look, if you switch to somebody else's software, if you tried to code it yourself, then it's on you. That right. I'm comfortable with that legal precedent.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, tractors cost way more than ink. And, the farm industry isn't necessarily, rolling in the dough, so to speak. So I don't know.
It's also probably not a big overlap with computer hackers. Like, as the Venn diagram of people who are, actually developing the software and the people who are out tilling the field, it's probably not huge.
But I don't think it's the field hands like saying, "Hey boss, like I'm gonna hack the tractor."
Right. No, I mean, I assume it's like anywhere in software, right? Where it's like, here's your pirated copy, or here's whatever, so that you don't have to pay this additional fee. And there, it's kind of like, okay, that's one thing. I don't know. It's there's a degree to which I'm comfortable with one thing for tractors and completely something different for printers, and so maybe that's just my personal bias, and I should try to abstract it even further. Like, do you have things that you run into where you're upset with the way that they want you to use it?
Do I have situations like that?
Yeah. I mean, to me, phones is a big one, right? Like, the idea of people jailbreaking phones, for example.
Right. Here's what I would say. I think that's an interesting example. But I think another interesting example, right? If we had a YouTube show and I'm wearing a Nike hoodie.
Yeah.
Technically I shouldn't be doing that because that's potentially representing that brand in a light that they're not okay with. But it's like,
that's that Jim McMahon case from the Bears in the 80s that does that. And it's one of those, like, the law is so cloudy when it comes to media and branding that the Jim McMahon case did a lot to make producers of entertainment's life a lot worse. Seriously. Right. Because on some level, the guidance is, look, if it's doing what it normally does, you're okay, right? So if you shoot a movie in a tavern and there's a Bud Light neon sign in the background, okay. After all, it's a tavern and they drink beer there, right? So, and the beer that's being used is, it's just beer, right? It's being used for the thing that it's intended to be used for. So legally, you're on pretty solid ground there. But most film producers go and make sure that they're not using that brand name anyway, because really what it comes down to is whoever can hire the best lawyers can win, especially after the precedent of that, like, we don't like the way this guy acts, therefore he shouldn't be associated with the Nike brand. And I believe, he lost that case, right? I'm pretty sure. And that's where we get now a lot of this sort of like, well, you can't use those brands. And that would be the legal precedent that would apply to what you're talking about. If they don't like, the way you and I talk about technology and they don't want our brand to be associated with it, that's where they would have a legal foot to stand on. That's a little bit different, though, than the thing that we're talking about in terms of, you can't use it in a video, but they're restricting that for a different reason than the sort of like, we sold it to you and now we get to control how you use it. I get your point. The other tangent that bugs me is like, in moving into a new house recently, we were trying to pretty aggressively cable cut, and I bought a Roku, and I looked at their privacy policy, and I kid you not, they should relabel it their invasion of privacy policy. First of all, it took me a half an hour to figure out how to sign up without giving them my credit card information. Because and I'm a UX designer. This was not an accident. I'll say these things carefully so as not to wind up in a slander situation against a company. But at the same time, the way it works is when you first get to your sign-up process, there is no choice to skip past the credit card thing. If you drop out and come back and reload, you will now find something that says skip this step.
Oh, wow.
Now, so that I can never be sued, There is a tiny % chance that was an accident. That it's some glitch, some developer forgot to make sure it worked a certain way, and he had it in one version, didn't have it in another, right? But probably not. Like, there are people whose jobs it is to think through the way this kind of software stuff works. And they also are in a situation where they could live update it. So, boo on them. I'm not a fan of the way that privacy policy. It basically says that whatever you watch, they can sell that. Whatever apps you install, they can sell what you watch on those apps. And I think there's precedent, whether they would have those relationships in shape or not, would be that, if you install the Amazon Video app, then you could conceivably be telling Roku that they're entitled to your Amazon data. Not that Amazon necessarily wants to make that sale, but you've at least given permission for it to happen on your end, just by using the Roku, and you can't do anything about it. Anyway, what else can I bitch about? But that's the other side of this, I guess, is what I was trying to get to, is that with something like Roku, they can force an update at any time, right? Or the apps that you use on your phone, people can essentially do the live update. We got hijacked before we started today because your Windows software wanted to update itself.
Right.
And yes, there is a place where you can choose not to receive that update. But for the most part, all the devices are kind of, you bought the thing, and now we get to continue to say how you can and can't use it through our software installs down the road. Usually it's, used for good, but like so many things. So anyway, that's my roundabout way of saying I hope Lexmark loses the case and that we can continue to use the cheap replacement toner. But like all of our stories, if we see development, we'll let you know.
You're listening to The Diginauts on the Good Talk Podcast Network.
It's time for segment 4. That means we're going to dig some more. And we start off segment 4 with the environment, the ever-changing, not ever-changing, the constantly depressing little subset of our revisit of stories. I just do kind of a quick headline glance each week to tell you kind of what's going on with climate change, with environmentalism in general, and some of the headlines that I thought were fun this week. Well, the first one was fun. This is delightful. Out of the Washington Post, the headline is Kentucky Coal Mining Museum in Harlan County switches to solar power.
Not the Onion.
Not the Onion. Like, this is a real story. What's delightful about it is, I mean, and it's presented with like very little irony, like despite the fact that the irony is built in. And they have, kind of interviews with people where their quotes are like, well, it's a little ironic. Like, no, it's a categorical definition style example of ironic. Anyway, I mean, it literally, this coal mining museum is there kind of to, it's a small little thing, and it's just kind of, talking about the men, especially in Kentucky, who, worked their lives in our past presenting coal, and the museum itself is switching to solar power, and they're doing it because of the opportunity to save money, which I think is the delightful little thing to take out of it, right? Like, it's not just like, oh yeah, coal's going to become renewable energy inevitably through the march of time, right? But it's like, you don't have to believe in global warming theory. You can think that every scientific study that's ever come out showing man-made impact on global warming is fake news, false. And it's still a good idea to switch to solar, right? Like, we've reached that tipping point, to the point that the people in Kentucky whose job it is to memorialize the coal industry have nonetheless decided that they should be running on solar power for financial reasons. So why are we fighting, right? Like, if we're past that tipping point so that it's now financially better to go that way. Ta-da! Anyway, I didn't mean to go into it that far. I was just going to read the headline. So a couple other ones out there. The Gulf of Mexico waters are freakishly warm, which could mean explosive springtime storms. That's not a big surprise.
Say that one fast.
Yeah. Freakishly warm springtime storms. And this is normal stuff, right? The faster the things heat up, the more you have temperature differentials, the bigger the winds you have, the more storm you have. There was another story out over the last month. They basically just said, yeah, it just means more weather in general. All right, here's the biggie, the frightening one that is the over the last little period of time. This is actually from last week. ScienceAlert.com headline: Heartbroken scientist admits the Great Barrier Reef is now terminal. The subline is a quote. It says, "We've failed."
Pretty much.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a toughie. In 2016, in about a year-long period, there was severe bleaching of the coral to the point that they believe that 93% of the Great Barrier Reef, experienced some nasty bleaching. But they were kind of like, but 2016 there was an El Nino, and the southern hemisphere got this such and such weather pattern, and we should be okay. They said that even the fastest growing coral would need about a decade or two to recover, which would require a couple years without any bleaching. But here in 2017, they're now coming out of the summer in the southern hemisphere. They think that about 2/3 of it was bleached again this year.
Wow.
Which is, who knows? I mean, it's something like a coral reef, right? Like, you can consider it an organism itself. You can consider all the things inside of it, each their own organisms, and, whether you talk about it being alive or dead or whatever. So the definition of putting something on it like it's terminal is tough, is what I'm trying to say. That said, this article includes the sentence: "It's easy to despair the fact that most of our children will no longer get the chance to see the Great Barrier Reef with their own eyes."
Wow.
Yeah. So, and there's, nice pictures of a coral reef that's just white. Not how it's supposed to look. And, in case you're worried about that, if you're concerned that we're not taking steps to take care of these things, I'll leave you with the final headline for Doomed this week. Trump eyes climate skeptic for key White House environmental post. Kathleen Harnett-White, who says carbon emissions are harmless and should not be regulated, is a top contender to run the Council on Environmental Quality.
Maybe she should suck on a muffler.
Since they're totally harmless. Your analogy is not perfect. There's other stuff in there. Oh no, actually she says carbon emissions, so that would include carbon monoxide. Maybe she should suck on a muffler. So let's move over to the rest of the Dig Some More for this week. We're going to focus on autonomous devices and artificial intelligence. We're going to think about the future, if there is one, after those doomed headlines. You got the first one for us. What are we talking about?
Yeah, there's definitely a future, and that future is more automated and less humans really doing the work. So in the first instance, there's robots that, in the grand scheme of things, can be, I guess, 500% faster than humans, and ultimately will put thousands of human jobs at risk as a result. So this one company created, like, they call it Sam. Oh, how friendly! Like,
of course,
hey, meet Sam.
It has a cute little name. It must be good for everyone.
Exactly. Well, SAM is an acronym for semi-automated mason. So this thing is like a bricklaying machine, and it can lay 3,000 bricks a day, right? So as you can imagine, that's way faster than, a person can do it, and way cheaper in the grand scheme of things. So construction robotics, it's a massive market and a massive opportunity to become more efficient than humans themselves.
Right. And we should say that we have several stories of robots doing the work of humans here and advancement in AI. And we put them in order, right? Like a bricklayer's job, I mean, and I say nothing to take away from the skills and the centuries of tradition of masons, because there's stuff there, right?
Yep.
Especially when it comes to like specific applied situational type construction. But when it comes to like, hey, we need a wall over there, yeah, it's obvious that a fast moving, never needs a break machine is going to be able to pull that off. And so it's not a shocking headline. I mean, it's a cool development, but it's not a shocking headline that a robot can do it 5 times as fast. Especially if you take away, coffee breaks and, going to sleep, for example. But so the next stories we're going to talk about get continuously more and more into the world of things we think humans should only be able to do, right? That machines shouldn't be able to do. So you had one story about a robot that prints a house.
Yes. So a Ukrainian company called Passive Dome, they're basically using 3D printing robots that can print parts for their tiny houses. So there's a whole tiny house movement. They range and I think start at under 400 square feet. So they could basically create that one in about 8 hours. Now, obviously, not everything in that Passive Dome house is 3D printed, right? But key components of it are, but that excludes windows, doors, everything from plumbing and electrical systems, right? That part or those parts still need to be implemented by
the basic
humans.
Framework of the house. So I mean, it's essentially a step from the next one, right? It's one thing to make a brick wall. It's another thing to then say, yeah, I can make a whole house, right? And you're printing it. Are they printing it out of are they 3D printing from? Is it like a concrete type thing? Is it its own proprietary goo?
I'm not sure the exact material, but ultimately their machine can print the walls, the floors, and the roof.
Okay. Wow. And really fast too, right? Like it's like as little as a day that it can make a house.
Exactly, like that 400 square foot one in basically 8 hours.
8 hours. Wow. That's amazing to think about. I mean, like I definitely have. I fantasize every time some, story comes up about like, here's your life off the grid in this tiny house. Like to me, that's like, yep, I will happily go sit by a lake in Alaska and, I'll endure a few nasty winters until the earth heats up and everybody else is melting. I'll be in my Alaskan lake home, that a robot printed me. But that means you got to get the robot printer up there, right?
Right.
They can't be small if they're printing houses.
Here's the thing. I've seen other examples in other companies where they literally, it's like, those it's almost like squeezing icing out of a long tube that's robot controlled.
Okay.
And, diving deeper, to address your question of, what are they really, what materials are they using? So in the case of the roof, the floor, and the walls, it's basically a combination of carbon fibers, polyurethane, resins, basalt fibers, and fiberglass.
Okay, so it's similar to what you would make a ship out of, or or the new Boeing airplanes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So our next story, the next job to get the axe is pizza delivery guys. There's a company that is replacing delivery folk in Europe. There was kind of a small rollout of a test program in London, and now the city of Holland, Germany, Domino's is actually going to use robots to deliver the pizzas.
And that's smart. I mean, the real requirement of like a human to do that, it's almost a waste of a human.
Sure. Well, tell that to the teenager who can get a car as soon as he's sold enough pizzas. Yeah, but I would argue, like, go find something else where you can work less for more money and you can go get your car faster. Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, as long as, and look, this is a much deeper subject than we're going to go into with all of these, but we've spoken of it before. We'll speak of it again, right? The entire economy has a chance of shifting if all sorts of jobs go this way, right? And we're barely down our list. It's going to get into more and more, quote unquote, professional work. But these little robots are little 6-wheeled jobbers. They're like, I don't know, it looks almost like a very large igloo cooler on wheels that kind of scoots along. It travels on the sidewalk. The part that gets me is it says they go 4 miles an hour, which wasn't it Domino's that like got famous by delivering your pizza in 10 minutes or less? 4 miles an hour. I mean, I guess partly you can be delivering them from more locations. I guess they're gonna have like kind of a fleet of vans where the pizzas actually get cooked. So you don't have to have quite as centralized a system as in the past. But they speed along down the sidewalks, and you use your phone to have a code to unlock the chamber. So, sorry, pizza delivery guys. Then it starts to get into more and more like things that we assume that people have to do. So, Tech World has a story about Sir Tim Berners-Lee laying out a scenario in which AI runs the financial world. So he's basically saying, look, it's not that hard to imagine that the decisions made by heads of corporations could be theoretically made by robots, especially if you get into the world of something like a holding company, where you're not necessarily creating a company, but you are creating a company that buys and sells companies. And if those AIs start learning, then they have not only, all of the data of everything humans have done for a few centuries, but they also then start to kind of try things and learn from their own experience. And eventually you've got a world where, they all are doing everything. Now, they kind of are using it as yet another moment to say, hey, let's think about our AI choices and let's not go nuts with letting them, take over every corner of humanity. But I just thought it was an interesting kind of stepping stone on our path of things that robots have been taking over. Because you next have a story about what we think of as one of our top professionals.
Yeah, you would think that lawyers require a lot of knowledge, a lot of practice, a lot of study, etc. But you think about some of the documents and some of the things necessary, right? It's monotonous, takes a lot of man hours or woman hours to really go through the documents, to evaluate them, etc. Well, JP Morgan Chase, really developed machine learning to parse all these financial deals that, again, took teams and teams of legals and thousands of hours. Now, their platform called Coin, because it's ultimately saving them money, which ultimately stands for contract intelligence, basically interprets these commercial loan agreements that until this project really launched, we're talking like nearly 400,000 hours of work by people, inclusive of lawyers and loan officers, to even evaluate these deals and make them happen. compared to this coin software that reviews these documents in seconds, is actually more accurate. And ironically, the article says never ask for a vacation. So
right,
it's all about unfortunately efficiency, which makes the company more money by saving money and time.
Yeah, and they're fans of that. So I mean, we're not yet talking about the sort of like, lawyers from Law and Order, where they're not arguing cases, but like all industries, some of the menial stuff that used to be the province of the junior who, hey, sort through these million books and run these numbers and come back to me, right? It's that kind of world. I guess it's kind of more of a financial application. So, I mean, that's definitely to me a little bit like, oh, wow. But then there's yet another story about creativity and robots. Now, we've talked a little bit about robots getting into the world of creativity. We've played on the show before some songs that were created by robots. We found them lacking, we should say. That's an emerging technology.
That's an understatement.
Well, this is kind of a breakthrough. This is a story of a creative agency in Japan, McCann, which has branches all over everywhere. But their Japanese branch, there was a person there working for several years on developing an AI that was capable of directing a commercial. So they did a head-to-head competition between one of their creative directors and this robot to go make a commercial for a breath mint. Yeah. And it's really interesting. I'll put a link to the article in the page because the article has two different commercials, one of which was directed by a computer and one of which was directed by a human. Now, obviously directed... They needed humans to sort of produce it, but the creative side of it, they had a computer come up with the concept and all that good stuff. And again, this was based on synthesizing millions and millions of commercials and the data of what has worked and hasn't worked in the past and everything. And they were tasked with communicating the message that when you put this breath mint in, you instantly have fresh breath and it will last for 10 minutes. So two commercials come up. One is this woman like drawing calligraphy on paper in a big vast field and she's kind of sloshing really fast and doing really impressive calligraphy. And she kind of spreads her message that way. The other one is this, it's hard to describe. It's you see a kind of a guy trundling along and then you realize it's actually a dog trundling along, and the dog stands up. He's on like a busy city street, and he stands up and he puts in the breath mint, and he becomes this like man dog who kind of dances and sparkles and then starts flying off into the distance. And you're hearing this music that's kind of like woof 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 woof, like it's got barking integrated into the music.
Are you sure you didn't do it?
It sounds like something I would come up with, right? I mean, it's interesting. It's tough to evaluate these from our perspective because they have the different cultural. Obviously, commercials in Japan are significantly different, or harder to appreciate if you don't understand Japanese culture. But what was interesting is they then took the two commercials. Do you have a guess which one the AI created?
The woof woof?
Absolutely. And that was my guess too, because like if it was really looking at the data of what worked with people, we all know that YouTube runs on cats, right? Like you can make a guess that the animal thing was what sort of the artificial intelligence would guess would work, right? Like cats and boobs sell things. That this is known. And an AI doesn't have any of the reservations about that. And the other one had a little bit more of an artistic feel to it, right? This woman was elevated. She was doing calligraphy. It was coming out really beautiful, and that's not necessarily a concept I could see a computer coming up with. All that said, the calligraphy one was pretty and all. It would not make me want to buy breath mints. The dancing woof woof dog was like, yeah, go dancing woof woof dog. Give me one of those, right? Like it totally worked for me. They took a study afterwards, and they did popular vote and creative agent vote, and it was split. The creative agents all preferred the one that the creative director did, but the public at large, by 54%. Preferred the woof woof dog.
Wow.
So they're taking that as a mark of like, this AI has bested a creative director at being creative. And you can interpret that how you will. But the bottom line is that, when you asked the public, and let's face it, they're the ones who are out there buying breath mints, they liked the thing that the machine came up with.
Right.
So it's not just bricklayers. It runs the spectrum all the way to things that we really would think of as the domain of those of us who have souls. Anyway, that's our show for this week. We appreciate you listening. We've been off so long, I've forgotten all the things I'm supposed to tell everybody. Go to goodtalknetwork.com, join us, follow us on Twitter. I am at Digital Deron.
And I'm at eFader.
We would happily talk to you on Twitter via our own handles or the Good Talk Network handle. You can also come to our website and leave us a message on our voicemail. We'd be happy to talk to you that way. We'd be happy to talk to you however you want to. What do you think of woof woof dogs? Would you prefer it? Go to the site and take a look and let us know what you think. We will be back next week with more society and technology. That is, unless we've been replaced by computers. Good talk.